Toka never expected that his entire class would be transported to another world, where everyone became heroes, except for himself, who was abandoned by the goddess. He was to be banished to a perilous abandoned relic, simply because he had the worst aptitude. Refusing to accept why someone from the lower ranks should be bullied, he vowed to survive and return. Before this, on their way to a school field trip on a bus, the class president, Ayaka, was harassed by a boastful Shugo, while only the highest status students jeered alongside, and the other classmates remained silent. For someone on the fringe like Tuka, his presence was as inconsequential as air, seemingly useless even if he were there. Suddenly, Tuka remembered being abused by his father as a child, while his mother indifferently watched TV, ignoring his pleas, which did nothing to help. Thus, he understood the despair Ayaka felt now, and told Shugo to stop bothering her. However, Shugo scoffed at him disdainfully, not regarding him as a person at all, filled with arrogance. Yet, Tuka's effort wasn't completely futile. Some higher-ranked classmates stood up to speak out. Even someone as insignificant as Toka dared to speak up for justice, prompting them to intervene for the sake of their reputation. Shugo, not daring to defy them, returned Ayaka's belongings and promised not to harass her again. However, Shugo, still furious, targeted another low-status classmate, kicking his seat continuously until he cried in fear. The teacher only advised Shugo to moderate his behavior, worried about the trouble if she were to commit suicide. As Tuka lamented the darkness of the world, a beam of light appeared. They were summoned by a goddess to another world. In this world, whenever the evil demon emperor arose, she would summon heroes from other worlds. 200 years ago, it was under the heroes' valiant efforts that the evil demon king was defeated. Many years later, the demon emperor has resurrected, and they were chosen as the new heroes. The classmates were confused, but under the teacher's guidance, they decided to follow the goddess's lead. The goddess explained that to return to their original world, they must open a reverse portal, which required the element of the evil king. In essence, they must defeat the demon emperor to return. The goddess knelt before them sincerely, pleading for their help in this world. Seeing her earnestness, they agreed to her request. However, being ordinary people, how could they possibly confront the demon emperor? Thus, the time to unlock the world of heroic potential arrived. The classmates all had decent aptitudes, while the previously bullying Shugo was of superior level. Takudo was exceptional, his power shattering the crystal ball. The goddess announced his rank as the highest S-class, and Ayaka's test results were also an astonishing S-class. Subsequently, many A-rank heroes appeared, followed by a third S-rank. This excited the goddess greatly, and she declared that they were the highest qualified group of heroes she had ever led. When it came to Tuka's turn, his test results were shockingly weak, the weakest the goddess had ever seen, and she completely disregarded his rank. Indeed, even in another world, he still seemed utterly useless. However, unexpectedly, a classmate who was also usually unnoticed and had been bullied on the bus awakened to possess the strongest dark energy. Following this, everyone began to practice and familiarize themselves with their new powers. Tuka, checking his panel, discovered his rank was E, the lowest in the class. The goddess then announced a special segment where Toka was brought to the center of the gathering. According to the traditions of this world, the lowest-ranked hero would be sent to an ancient relic. This was somewhat cruel. Survive, and you're free. Fail, and it's likely death. Upon hearing this, Tuka revealed he possessed a skill called Status Abnormality Bestowal, which the goddess dismissed as utterly worthless, a useless skill. Tuka was indignant. Why should he be banished just like that? The rest of the class couldn't bear to watch, feeling Tuka was wasting everyone's time. Even those who had low status like him in the real world joined in to kick him while he was down, despite Tuka having helped them before. The teleportation circle was then activated, and Tuka had no escape from his fate of being sent to the relic. In the end, only Ayaka spoke up for him, pleading with the goddess to spare Tuka. However, the goddess, having lost her patience, struck her down with a blow. Seeing the unreasonable goddess and his classmates' betrayal, Tuka vowed to show them all. Upon arriving at the abandoned relic, he immediately faced danger. Against a clearly more powerful foe, he could only desperately flee. The fear brought tears to his eyes. Faced with death, His bitterness overcame his fear. Disrespected in the real world and abandoned in another, he refused to die just like that. He wanted power. He wanted revenge. Surprisingly, his desperate attempt managed to control the monster. As he turned to flee, he encountered another creature and had to use the same tactic, which to his amazement, worked again. But now, his greatest despair was that his MP was depleted and another beast was hot on his heels. Facing this situation, he had no choice but to fight with all he had, just like he had survived on his own as a child. The goddess could never have imagined that Tuka, who was considered a mere E-rank talent and a waste, actually possessed the most bizarre skill in the class. She teleported Tuka to the hardest dungeon in the world, intending to send him to his death. Little did she know, Tuka's seemingly weak toxic skill actually caused damage based on a percentage of health, and he also had a skill that could put targets to sleep, which was used in combination. At that moment, Tuka was being attacked by a group of monsters at level hundreds. Even the goddess herself would probably be toyed with to death in such a situation. Tuka thought he could only use his skills to buy time. Just as his MP was depleted and all the monsters closed in again, preparing for a desperate fight, Tuka suddenly heard the sound of leveling up, and his level soared to 258. It was then that Tuka realized his toxic skill was a noble percentage-based health-depleting ability. Most crucially, since the level increase, his skills could now target multiple enemies. At this moment, the terrifying monsters in Tuka's eyes were just moving experience points. As a large number of bodies fell, the few remaining monsters turned and ran. After successfully dealing with the immediate crisis, Tuka's stomach protested, but it was clear there was no food around. However, he then thought about it. The monsters he had just defeated were just like chicken and beef. So Tuka prepared to cut some meat to eat, but the monster's skin was too tough, and as a mage like Tuka, he couldn't cut through it. Therefore, he turned his attention to the eyes. After struggling with disgust and eating the eyeballs, Tuka discovered they were highly toxic and inedible. No wonder no one could walk out of this place. Just when he felt despair, Tuka suddenly noticed that the bag the goddess had given him was glowing. He opened the bag and found it contained beef jerky and happy water. This item could apparently generate food based on one's thoughts. Initially, Tuka was dissatisfied with the shabby bag the goddess had given him, but now he felt it was the only good thing she had done. After killing countless monsters, Tuka's level rose to over 600. He continued exploring the dungeon and found a large number of human skeletons along the way. Tuka decisively chose to loot the corpses, collecting everything from gems to other items. Gradually, he sensed something was wrong. All these humans were sent here by the goddess, but clearly, these skeletons had been very powerful in life. According to the goddess, weren't all the talents she teleported E-rank? It wasn't until Tuka read a manual left by one of the corpses that he understood that in this world, E-rank was actually the highest talent. Ironically, the goddess feared that they would hold others back, so she sent what she saw as the useless ones here to die. While looting the corpses, Tuka collected many enhancements left by his predecessors, such as potions lost since ancient times, or runes capable of unleashing the power of forbidden spells. He also learned about the boss of the labyrinth. Looking at his own status bar, Tuka, now at level 1200, felt he was strong enough to initiate an attack on the boss. But as soon as he stepped out, his palm was instantly pierced. He hadn't expected the monster to react so quickly. To use his skills, Tuka had to raise his hand and recite the skill name. Now, how would he be able to defeat the boss, especially since his first stealth attack had failed, alerting the boss who had now fully awakened? Instead of attacking immediately, the boss summoned a horde of zombies, each bearing the face of a human who had previously died here. Tuka only used sleep to control them. After receiving so much help from his predecessors, he couldn't bring himself to harm these familiar faces. Little did he know, his helpless demeanor only excited the boss more. But the more excited the boss got, the harder Tuka performed. The boss was enjoying Tuka's despair. At the moment when the boss was most enjoying himself, Tuka unleashed his skill. He had only feigned incompetence to exploit a deadly weakness common among the arrogant. As long as he could hit the target, no matter how much health the target had, Tuka could control and poison them directly. After defeating the boss, the souls that had been imprisoned and tortured for years were also freed. Each one showed kindness to Tuka before dissipating. advising him to make good use of their wealth or skills. Afterward, Tuka took the gem from the boss's forehead, which opened the door. Now it was time for his revenge on the goddess. The goddess never expected that Tuka, whom she deemed useless and threw into a labyrinth, would actually manage to survive and escape the maze using his useless status condition skill. She had assumed the skill's success rate would be very low, but little did she know. In Tuka's hands, it turned into a 100% success rate. It allowed him to paralyze opponents so they couldn't move, or put them to sleep while slowly poisoning them to death. As the skill level increased, Tuka could even choose to only paralyze certain parts of an opponent's body, such as their mouth or other body parts, while the poisoning could be set to be lethal or non-lethal. With these abilities, Tuka could do many things, such as torture or interrogate his enemies. Meanwhile, by killing monsters in the labyrinth, Tuka's level skyrocketed to a terrifying 1789. To put it in perspective, the highest level among the classmates who were transported with him, who were killing monsters 24 hours a day, was only 18. This highlights just how formidable the monsters Tuka defeated were. After studying his attributes, Tuka ventured into the monster forest intending to test the new features of his skill on a few beasts. Soon, he came across a group of slimes, and it was clear that a group of larger slimes was bullying a smaller one. Seeing this and relating it to his own experiences, Tuka didn't hesitate to intervene. After applying paralysis and poison to the slimes, he conducted experiments and found that the poison could be altered to a non-lethal state, and the paralysis could be actively removed. After driving away the group of slimes, Tuka also cured the smaller slime of its paralysis. Just as Tuka was about to leave, the little slime clung to him and refused to part ways. Thus, he had no choice but to take it as a pet, placing it in his hat behind him to serve as an extra set of eyes. After all this, Tuka began researching the forbidden spell catalog he found in the labyrinth. The goddess, after all, had a blessing that made her immune to any negative effects, so his abilities would not work on her. Therefore, if Tuka wanted to seek revenge on the goddess, he had to find a way to break her blessing. Meanwhile, not far from Tuka, an elf princess was being chased by 4 minions. Fortunately, thanks to her agility, she quickly shook off the pursuers. Then, she pulled out a holy sword from her bag and began to transform. After chanting for a while, she applied a strengthening buff to herself, which resulted in her wearing just an additional mask. Could the budget not be spent on such bizarre things? She wondered. At the same time, the 4 minions found Tuka and asked him if he had seen the elf princess. Not wanting to attract trouble, Tuka pretended to be compliant, planning to deceive them. However, seeing their ugly faces and hearing their foul language, Tuka realized these were not good people. Thus, he dropped his act and used his skills to knock them to the ground, putting them into a deep sleep. After this, his slime companion informed Tuka that there was someone else nearby, and it was the pursued elf princess. She also sensed a creepy aura. While she wondered what kind of being could make the surrounding elves tremble with fear, a strange noise suddenly came from behind her. Reacting instinctively, she was paralyzed by Tuka, though he did not poison her, sensing she harbored no ill intentions towards him. Tuka then released the paralysis on her head so she could speak. He started to gather information from her. Learning that Tuka had dealt with the 4 pursuers, the princess promised to tell him everything she knew. Hearing this, Tuka took out a forbidden spell scroll and asked her what was written on it. However, the princess only recognized it as an ancient script and did not know its meaning. She did know someone familiar with this type of literature, a forbidden witch exiled to the Golden Nest Demon group, but she was unsure of the exact location. After all, that place was the most dangerous on the continent, and no one dared to venture there. This information was enough for Tuka. He stated that the princess would be able to move freely in a few minutes, but he wouldn't guarantee her safety during that time. Then, he turned and left, leaving the beautiful lady alone. I really care about the beautiful lady's safety. The man possesses a skill that can inflict abnormal statuses on enemies. Whether it's rendering the opponent immobile, slowly poisoning them to death, or putting a sleep-deprived beautiful girl into a deep sleep, he can successfully apply it 100% of the time if he so desires. However, this skill is uniquely ineffective against a goddess, simply because she has a blessing that grants her immunity to any negative statuses. Therefore, if Tuka wants to get revenge on the goddess, he must first find a witch capable of deciphering the index of forbidden spells. Then, he can use a forbidden spell to break the goddess's blessing. But before that, Tuca wants to strengthen a slime first, since it can sense the location of others. Using a guide to another world, combined with rumors he heard from other adventurers, Tuca quickly found a material suitable for strengthening the slime. It was the bone powder of the Skeleton King of Final Embrace, found in this maze. Coincidentally, a new floor had recently appeared in this maze, and the local lord was recruiting a large number of adventurers to conquer it. Anyone who could retrieve the Dragon Eye Holy Grail, a treasure sleeping in the maze, would be rewarded with 300 gold coins by the lord. Thus, Tuca decisively chose to sign up. However, while in line, Tuca saw a blonde man harassing a young lady behind him. Although the lady was wrapped up tightly, the blonde man recognized her at a glance. It was Saras, the wanted elf princess and former head of the Knights, because Monk had once invited her to dinner, but was ruthlessly rejected. Monk, holding a grudge, had such a deep impression of Saras that even if she turned to ash, he could recognize her, not to mention her uniquely elfish long ears, peeking out from under her cloak, which directly betrayed her identity. Saying so, Monk pulled open Saras's cloak. However, Saras had long used magic to alter her appearance. Seeing her human-like ears, Monk was stunned and ultimately could only flee the scene, embarrassed by his mistake. Later, Tuca found Saras. Although she had changed her appearance, Tuca recognized her at a glance. Tuca sought her help to pick some items for exploring the maze. After buying some items, Tuca, as agreed, gave the girl 3 silver coins. But as they were parting, Sarah suddenly fainted on the ground. Seeing her dark circles, Tuca knew it was due to lack of rest, so he suggested she find an inn to rest. After expressing her thanks to Tuca, Saras hurriedly left. Then Tuca headed to the maze alone, but right upon entering, he saw 2 young guys being chased by a monster. After the young guys ran away, Tuca realized this monster was a juvenile version of the bull demon previously encountered in the maze. So, Tuca directly applied a combination of paralysis and poisoning, then pulled out the newly bought dagger and easily dispatched the monster with a single stab. When the young guys returned with their older brother, all they saw was the monster's body, killed with a single strike. And with that discovery, they recognized Tuca as a master. Little did they know that such monsters were mere trash to Tuca, not even yielding any experience points. As Tuca proceeded downward, he encountered Monk again. From the looks of it, it was clear that Monk was planning to take revenge on the elf, Saras, intending to punish her severely. Hearing their foul language, Tuca could hardly stand it and stepped forward. After immobilizing them with paralysis, he also inflicted a poison status. Tuca showed no mercy towards such scum. Seeing Monk still shouting in such a situation, Tuca couldn't help but laugh before he turned and walked away, leaving Monk and his group as fodder for the monsters. Tuca continued to overpower everything along the way. The monsters couldn't last more than 2.5 seconds in his hands, and the sight of their bodies, unmarred by any wounds, scared many other adventurers away. After all, such methods were too eerie. Soon, Tuca reached the deepest part of the labyrinth and found the Dragon Eye Holy Grail spoken of by the Lord. However, noticing a statue nearby, Tuca knew that as soon as he picked up the Holy Grail, the statue would come to life. Decisively, he applied paralysis and poison to it. The statue could only watch in extreme reluctance as Tuca took the Holy Grail, then crumbled into pieces in the same state of frustration. While Tuca was examining the Holy Grail, his slime sounded an alarm, and the person who arrived was Saras, who had met Tuca twice before. Generously, Tuca handed the Holy Grail to Saras, knowing she was short on money and could exchange it for gold coins with the Lord. After all, Tuca wasn't lacking in funds. What he needed was only the bone powder of the Skeleton King, hidden beneath a secret door. However, Saras didn't want to take something for nothing, so she offered to become Tuca's guard as a way to repay him. Hearing this, Tuca quickly agreed, as he was in need of a melee fighter, and keeping her nearby for emergencies seemed like a good choice. After reaching the secret door, Saras showed off her abilities, earning a couple of compliments from Tuca. However, seeing her dark circles, Tuca felt a pang of sympathy, so he found a secret room and suggested that Saras rest there. Saras was a bit worried at first because she could still sense the presence of monsters nearby. Reluctantly, Tuka brought out the slime and explained the situation to Saras. Relieved, she agreed to lie down on a nearby stone slab to rest for a while. But Tuka felt it wasn't enough, so he directly applied a sleep status to her, causing her to fall into a deep sleep. Unexpectedly, as Saras fell into slumber, her appearance also returned to normal. Meanwhile, the mastermind who had sent men to kill Saras discovered that his 4 subordinates were already dead, but he mistakenly thought it was Saras's doing. This seemed to ignite the man's fighting spirit. The goddess could never have dreamed that Tuka, whom she considered a worthless ant, would become the strongest person in the world after breaking through the labyrinth. This was because Tuka's seemingly worthless skill, status abnormality, possessed a concept-level ability with a forced hit mechanism. No matter how powerful the monster, he only needed to paralyze it with one move, and then follow up with poisoning. The opponent could only stand there helplessly waiting for death. This was just like the abyssal monster, the Skeleton King, hidden deep in the ruins. Even top adventurer teams had no choice but to flee upon encountering it. Even Saras, the former captain of the Knights and an elf, panicked at the sight of the Skeleton King. She knew well that with her strength, it was impossible to safely leave the place with Tuka. Unexpectedly, Tuka then released his skill, and within 2 minutes, the Skeleton King was dealt with. After defeating the Skeleton King, Tuka successfully found the materials needed for upgrading his slime. However, just as he was preparing to leave, the slime sensed something within the corpse of the Skeleton King. Following its hint, Tuka discovered a magical beast egg wrapped in magical fabric. Though unsure of what it was, Tuka didn't think much of it and took the egg back to the surface, ignoring the adventurers who were distracted by the Dragon Eye Holy Grail. That night, Tuka discussed a matter with Saras. He wanted to hire her as a guard. After all, his goal was to go to the demon horde to find the Forbidden Witch, where they would frequently be attacked by groups of monsters. He would feel more secure with someone skilled in combat behind him. Hearing this, Saras hesitated. Although this did not conflict with her journey, she had her own concerns. Tuka laid everything out in the open, having already seen through Saras's true identity because of his sleep-granting skill. Hearing this, Saras stopped pretending and revealed her true form. It turns out an elf's disguise ability fails when they fall asleep, which is why she was hesitant about Tuka's invitation. However, since Tuka already knew her identity, the two agreed to travel together. As for the guard's compensation, Tuka casually pulled out a blue gemstone. Seeing this, Saras was startled and shaken. It was the legendary Azure Dragonstone, an item far more valuable than the Dragon Eye Holy Grail. Tuka hadn't realized that the relic he had casually picked up was so valuable. But having given it, no matter how much Saras refused, he insisted she keep it. The next day, due to Saras being invited by the Lord to a banquet, the two temporarily parted ways after arranging a time and place to meet later. Tuka didn't want to wait until the appointed time only to find that Saras was nowhere to be seen. From conversations with passers-by, he learned that the so-called banquet was actually a trap set by the Lord specifically for Saras, and the ones who had acted were none other than the continent's strongest, the Black Dragon Knights. Meanwhile, Saras, who had barely escaped, was now being pursued. Her illusions had been violently broken through, and now, as the light Saras, she was in a state of chaos and unable to transform. Coupled with the formidable strength of the Black Dragon Knights, Saras quickly found herself in a difficult battle. Just as she managed to defeat the ordinary members who were chasing her, a subordinate leader suddenly ambushed her from behind. Facing the man's foul language, Saras accidentally slipped and fell to the ground. Seizing the opportunity, the man kicked away the longsword from Saras's hand and then pinned her firmly to the ground, rendering her immobile. As Saras despairingly closed her eyes against the ugly face of the man, Tuka arrived just in time, using his paralysis skill on the man. Seeing that Tuka had saved her life, Saras's first reaction was not joy, but concern that continuing to accompany her would put Tuka in danger. Therefore, she decided to return the Azure Dragonstone to Tuka and suggested that their agreement for her to act as his guard be cancelled. Hearing this, Tuka, somewhat helplessly, tossed a bag to Saras. Inside the bag were countless Azure Dragonstones. He claimed she was the most formidable guard he had ever met and asked her to take off her equipment. The man had never expected that even when facing the strongest beings in human history, His sure-hit ability to inflict abnormal statuses would make it easy to instantly kill them. What surprised him even more was that initially, the lack of range was his problem, but after enhancing the slime, the increased range extended as far as he himself could reach. He could inflict abnormal statuses on others from an extremely long distance, and with his 100% success rate, the life or death of his enemies hung on his very thoughts. Not long ago, Touka had planned to spare an enemy's life to extract information. However, he hadn't anticipated that a sudden spear would blow the enemy's head off. Looking up, Touka recognized that this was the strongest team from another world, led by Sivit, who also held the title of the strongest human. Although he had considered instantly killing them, not to mention the range issue, he was more concerned that if he made a move, they might act first, leading to a frustrated death for himself. Seeing that they were not immediately aggressive, Touka decided to first hear what they had to say. Although he had anticipated it, he knew their goal was to kill Saras. Unexpectedly at that moment, Sivit suddenly took an interest in Touka, wondering why, at the brink of life and death, he could still manage to smile. Hearing Sivit say this, Touka realized that he might involuntarily smile during critical moments, but he did not explain further. Instead, he took the opportunity to talk to Sivit as well. However, just as he reported a false name, Sivit immediately saw through it. Sivit seemed to have the ability to detect lies. At this point, his subordinates were also very curious as to why they weren't allowed to act immediately, but Sivit's counter-question left them puzzled. Isn't it astonishing that even in front of the 5 dragon knights, Touka showed no fear? It turned out that Sivit had known all along what Touka was thinking. This was also what he was curious about. What gave Touka the confidence to confront them? Thinking that any lie would be exposed, Touka came up with a good strategy, telling a mix of truth and falsehood. After declaring himself a hero from another world, this instantly shocked everyone. It was then that Sivit finally understood where Touka's confidence came from. Heroes generally have very powerful blessings, making it not impossible to challenge beyond their level. What puzzled him, however, was why Touka appeared here. Usually, shouldn't he be working under the goddess? Hearing this, Touka immediately stated that his situation was quite special, which is why he acted separately from other heroes. Of course, in a way, he wasn't wrong. Sensing that Touka wasn't lying, this piqued Sivit's curiosity as to why. But Touka responded confidently because the others' levels were far below his. Indeed, he was an E-rank hero, significantly lower than the average C-rank heroes. This instantly caused Sivit to misunderstand, thinking Touka was a man even the goddess recognized as special. However, Sivit was soon stunned by what Touka said. Knowing that Touka wanted some leeway to become stronger before defeating him, and even his boastful words about wanting to trample on the high and mighty goddess made Sivit laugh. Although Sivit didn't know what had transpired between Touka and the goddess, he found it amusing. Moreover, from Touka's words, he couldn't tell at all that he was lying. So the next second, Sivit agreed to let Touka go and wait for the day he would defeat him. Just when Sivit thought he had been quite generous, he didn't expect Touka to have even bigger demands. He wanted Sivit to spare Saras as well, stating he needed to use Saras later to gain power. This also greatly amused Sivit, who actually agreed to Touka's request the next second. But when his subordinates tried to remind him, he simply shushed them, declaring the matter settled, and warned them not to blame him for being ruthless otherwise. Sivit then prepared to leave, bidding farewell to Touka with a smile, unaware that his life was already nearing its end. Yes, Touka had only told half the truth earlier. He didn't plan to kill Chivit later, but was ready to act right then. The moment he acted, Chivit almost reacted in time, but it was too late. After falling into his abnormal status, they were all lambs to the slaughter. Chivit, incredulous, asked Touka why, and in an instant, everyone felt their lives rapidly draining away. But to Touka's surprise, even so, Sivit still had the strength to struggle. The title of humanity's strongest was indeed not in vain. He was the first person Touka had seen who could still move while paralyzed. But that was all, as now he didn't even have the strength to pick up a weapon. However, just to be safe, Touka still prepared thoroughly. He hadn't summoned the slime earlier because he needed to accumulate power. And indeed, an unexpected event occurred at that time. As the first person fell poisoned, his life sent up a flare, clearly signaling other troops. And the next second, Tuka saw the sky filled with flying dragons. Yet, he was not afraid at all. Although Sivit regained some vitality and warned his subordinates not to approach carelessly, suggesting they launch long-range attacks from the sky, he could never have imagined at that moment that Tuka had already resolved the issue with his range. Although activating it consumed a lot of his magical power, it only took him a few seconds. Immediately, Tuka launched a full-scale long-range attack. What Tuka didn't expect was that the system then alerted him that he had acquired new skills, one that triggered an inner fury, which combined with paralysis should kill enemies faster, and another that caused blindness. There was also a freezing ability that he didn't use because by the time he came to his senses, the enemies were almost entirely annihilated. Only Chivit was still struggling to survive. Tuka looked at him and said, "I'm not some noble hero out to save the world. Right now, I'm just an avenger." As soon as the words fell, the man's life also came to an end. The man never expected that the knight, who always appeared so serious, would secretly sniff his clothes in private, and he caught her in the act, which completely baffled Tuka. Not long before this incident, after swiftly defeating the strongest human, Tuka continued towards the direction of the Forbidden Witch, who might know how to deal with the goddess. However, before proceeding, he decided to make some purchases in town. He bought a mask for emergencies, and then went to book a room at an inn. Unexpectedly, to save on expenses, Saras suggested they book just one room. With such an opportunity handed to him, he agreed to a single room. Later, the two went to a restaurant to eat. There, Tuka heard intriguing intelligence. The 5 dragon knights had been killed by a group of sorcerers. These knights were led by the very human Tuka had just annihilated. Yet here, they were said to have been killed by sorcerers. While Tuka was unsure what to make of this, he was happy to let someone else take the blame. What caught his attention more was another piece of information. He overheard people discussing the Forbidden Witch, and some had even seen her. Immediately, Tuka approached them to inquire further. Indeed, they were forthcoming. They told Tuka that the person who had seen the witch was the strongest blood fighter in the area, who just happened to be at the restaurant. Signaled by them, Tuka approached her, trying to open the conversation with money. However, the leopard woman didn't take the bait, and asked Tuka to be straightforward. Tuka asked if she knew where the Forbidden Witch was, but to his surprise, she claimed ignorance and even scolded him for believing such rumors. She had only been to the Golden Perch demon swarm, and had never seen the witch herself. After saying this, she turned and left. What she didn't know was that Saras had the ability to detect lies. The leopard woman's hasty departure confirmed she knew something about the witch's whereabouts. At that moment, the leopard woman was conversing with a white-haired girl. Back in their room, realizing the urgency of getting the leopard woman to talk, Saras had an idea. She told Tuka that for a blood fighter, money was crucial. It could buy their freedom from their masters. This country was famous for its blood-fighting arenas, where slaves and mercenaries fought for survival. Combatants in these arenas, known as blood fighters, could win substantial rewards if victorious, and the leopard woman was originally a slave. With this new lead, the two ceased their discussion. To Tuka's surprise, it wasn't long before Saras began practicing with a sword. Learning that this was part of her nightly routine, Tuka became interested in learning a few moves himself, as he had become too reliant on his skills. Perhaps, he thought, these could come in handy at a critical moment. Saras agreed without hesitation. As a former knight captain, she had considerable experience in this area. After inviting Tuka to attack her, he launched a fierce assault, but was quickly subdued by her. After a vigorous bout, Saras decided to wash Tuka's clothes. However, almost by accident, she found herself smelling them, feeling as if she was absorbing a part of Tuka into herself. While she was lost in thought, Tuka entered the room but did not confront her. He had only come to check on his missing clothes. Learning that Saras insisted on washing them, as this was usual for her, Tuka humbly complied. When he regained his senses, Saras was already sound asleep, while he found himself wide awake. Knowing Tuka couldn't sleep, she thoughtfully offered him 3 types of herbs, explaining that some could help with sleep, while others would invigorate and excite him. Realizing she might have misspoken, but after understanding their effects, Tuka decided to try them. Unexpectedly, after drinking the herbs, not only did he remain awake, but he also felt extremely energized. Learning that Saras had accidentally mixed up the herbs, Tuca couldn't blame her. Instead, he humorously remarked that he might as well read some books that night. However, he couldn't concentrate on reading a single word. Seeing Tuca's gentlemanly behavior made Saras question if he was particularly resistant to temptation. Her words inadvertently revealed that her mixing up the herbs had been intentional. Tuca responded by telling Saras that his mind was solely focused on revenge, making it difficult for him to pay attention to anything else, though things might change after his revenge. Hearing this, Saras instantly understood and stopped trying to tempt him, instead seriously assuring him of her full support in his quest for revenge. The next morning, they went to the blood-fighting arena, but Saras soon received troubling news. She told Tuca that the leopard woman might not be lacking money, as she had already earned enough 2 years ago to buy her freedom. Additionally, Saras heard a strange rumor that the leopard woman might be trying to redeem a child. Moreover, it was crucial to note that most slaves usually die in their final matches, and coincidentally, the leopard woman's last fight was scheduled for the next day, meaning she might face danger. There were rumors that the Duke's family, who operated the arena, might rig the last fight to ensure a fatal outcome for the blood fighters. Rather than being alarmed, Tuca saw this as a potential breakthrough opportunity. He learned 2 new skills that can afflict others with abnormal states, which could kill someone imperceptibly. One day, seeing a girl being bullied by a group, he directly inflicted blindness and rage on the bullies. The next second, they started fighting each other. Afterwards, he left nonchalantly. Just before this, Eve knew the whereabouts of the taboo witch, but realized that in her final battle tomorrow, the Duke might likely see her dead. So, soon after, Tuca approached Eve to explain the situation, telling her that if she was willing to disclose the location of the taboo witch, he would find a way to save her, and the dark elf she wished to redeem. Although unsure how Tuca figured it out, Eve chose to refuse. Not only did she not believe the Duke would be so cruel, more importantly, even if she revealed the witch's location, she doubted Tuca could survive there, since the Golden Nest of Demons was a very dangerous place. For Tuca, she really couldn't see that he had such strength. Even when Tuca claimed he had killed the 5 Dragon Knights, she still didn't believe him, until Tuca paralyzed her. She felt it was absurd. At the same time, Saras also provided additional evidence, claiming she was the elf previously hunted by the 5 Dragon Knights. Tuca's absurd power, along with Saras's assistance, made Eve have to believe, but even so, she still chose to refuse. Firstly, the 3 had only met once and weren't trustworthy. Secondly, she wanted to verify whether the Duke was lying. Tuca naturally understood her concerns, so he told her he would wait for her tonight at the bridge by the city gate in case she changed her mind. Just like that, Tuca also left nonchalantly. However, on the way, he unexpectedly encountered a bullying incident. 4 men were bullying a young girl, and they were dressed as the same sorcerer group that had recently impersonated him in killing the 5 Dragon Knights. Tuca was originally happy to have someone else take the blame, but seeing someone misusing his name to do evil, he decisively intervened, using his skills to make them fight each other. Meanwhile, Eve had already returned to her residence to check if the Duke would tamper with anything. That evening, she lurked at the Duke's door, coincidentally hearing him discussing the matter with his subordinates. Unknowingly, their conversation devastated her. It turns out that by tomorrow, the Duke would find an excuse to make her drink an anesthetic before the duel, then let her opponent beat her to death. Not only that, the dark elf she always wanted to redeem would become a plaything for the other side after her death. Only now did she realize from start to finish, the Duke never regarded her as a person. She thought that given her contributions to the arena so far, he would show some leniency, but now thinking about it, she found it laughable. Without any hesitation, Eve immediately went to the city gate to find Tuca, indicating she would tell him the location of the taboo witch, but on the condition that he must take both her and the dark elf away. At the same time, the dark elf mentioned by Eve, who is Lisbeth, was working at a restaurant. However, she was not only harassed by customers who found her attractive, but also the restaurant's owner, seeing her young age, accused her of knowing how to seduce men. The next moment, she hit her on the head. Indeed, this owner was the guardian sent by the Duke. For years, Lisbeth had endured countless unprovoked scoldings and beatings from him. However, as the owner was being arrogant, Eve suddenly entered the restaurant. It was then she realized that the owner had always been excessively cruel. Just as she was about to eliminate him before leaving, the owner suddenly started begging for mercy, claiming that everything was instructed by the Duke and that she was just following orders. She even said that if she spared her, she wouldn't reveal Eve's plan to escape. It was a statement not even a dog would believe, yet Eve believed it. The owner expressed that he would never forget Eve's mercy for the rest of his life. However, while her tricks might deceive others, they could not fool Tuca. After letting Eve and Lisbeth leave first, he told the owner to stop pretending. Realizing that Tuca was not easily fooled, the owner then showed his true colors, threatening that she was the only one who could save them now, and killing her would be their doom. But how could Tuca believe her nonsense? He released a skill on her, causing her to die on the spot. Afterwards, Tuca met up with Eve and the others. Under the cover of a dark and windy night, they planned to sneak out of the city. However, as expected, an unexpected event occurred. Seeing a large fire breaking out behind them, they immediately realized they were being pursued. They could never have anticipated being discovered so quickly. At that moment, Eve suddenly remembered that today, upon returning to her residence, she had accidentally bumped into the leader of the sorcerer group, Muaji. Initially thinking it was just a greeting, she now recalled that he might have left a mark on her, but discussing it now was useless. Seeing no way to hide, Tuca decided they had to fight. The hunt was about to begin.